Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith. Today, I am talking about Shaft by Ernest Tidyman, or as he's known in the superhero community, Tidyman. Ernest Tidyman, Shaft. This edition is from Dynamite, which is a comic book company that has put out some books. And this is part of my reading books that have been made into movies, book bundle, as I'm calling it. And this is about John Shaft, a black private detective in 1969, 1970 New York City. And he is hired by a criminal kingpin to find said kingpin's missing daughter. And it's going to involve some militant black power people and the mob, the Italian mob, and all sorts of other crazy New York characters. So, there's your nutshell. For the too long didn't watch crowd, 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked this. It didn't start out that way. I was looking for a while. I'm like, so far we're looking at 3 stars. I like it. That's as far as I'm gonna go. But eventually I got into it, and I ended up really, really liking this book. So first of all, a little bit of history. Ernest Tidyman is from Cleveland, Ohio. He's a white guy from Cleveland, Ohio. And he was a reporter, decided to try his hand at writing fiction. His first book didn't do very well. And then I believe he was an agent who was one of the first black literary agents in the country, something like that. I looked all this up. He commissioned Ernest Tidyman to write a black private detective book. There was some other book, I can't remember what it was called, some book about the black community or the black lifestyle, the black experience that was very popular. And so they wanted take what that is and make it a private detective story. And so Ernest Tidyman just was commissioned to write this book. And he wrote 6 or 7 Shaft novels. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 Shaft novels. But not just that. But his screenwriting credits include Shaft, The French Connection, and High Plains Drifter, among other things. And he won an Academy Award for his work on The French Connection. So he's got bona fides as a writer, but it is interesting that this white guy from Cleveland, Ohio, wrote possibly the quintessential black private detective of the blaxploitation era. So all of that being said, we're introduced to Shaft as he's walking home after a night with a lady, and he's walking the streets of New York, heading towards his office, I think, and not his apartment. I think he's going to his office, and he notices some odd things, odd behavior from people he knows, and so he wants to get the lowdown. He finds out somebody's looking for him, and that leads into things, which eventually leads to him talking with Knox Persons, who is, as he's described, he is Kingpin from the Daredevil comic books, but black. Or essentially, Michael Clark Duncan in the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck. And I could perfectly see Michael Clark Duncan playing this character. But he's a huge, beefy, some would say overweight, not like huge muscle, Dwayne Johnson or Arnold Schwarzenegger at his prime kind of thing, but a big beefy dude with muscles, incredibly strong, but he wears white suits just like Kingpin. His aesthetic is all black and white, and again, so he runs. Basically, he runs all of crime in Harlem, and he comes to Shaft because his daughter is missing. He wants Shaft to find his daughter. That's our setup, essentially. Um, and New York City is absolutely a character in this story. If you have ever read Raymond Chandler's, Philip Marlowe stuff, Los Angeles is very much a part of those stories. The Boston in Robert B. Parker's Spencer books. This story lives and breathes, as far as I can tell. I've not been there, but so much description about not just the places he goes, but the way the city lives and breathes. New York City, a very big part of this. Now, the book was published in 1970. Written, I believe, started in 68, finished in 69, which is why in my description, or when I was talking about it, I said Shaft is a private eye in New York in 69 or 70, because it doesn't say exactly what year this is taking place. It is very much a product of its time. There is a lot of racist and homophobic language, and this is in third person. It's third person, omniscient narrator, which I think is interesting because typically PI books are first person. I don't know how that would play with a white guy writing first person black character, and I don't know if it's a conscious choice he made to not do it that way. But so it is mostly from Shaft's POV. So a lot of the things, a lot of the problematic language, one could look at as being from Shaft's POV. A lot of the racist stuff is things said by characters, but the homophobic stuff is not generally things that are being said by characters. It's just in the description of it. It might say Shaft was walking down the street and noticed a gay person walking towards him, but that's not the words they used. So you could look at it as, again, since it's Shaft's POV, this is how he would see, this is the language he would use, not necessarily the language the author would use, if that makes sense. And you could look at it as, again, it's New York 1970. This is just the way things were. I wasn't there. I can't say. I'm simply saying there's a lot of problematic language in the book. And I wonder if this were written today, but set back in 1970, if the language would be the same. Again, in the dialogue, I think it would be, because that's the way people at the time, these types of people, and I mean all different types of people, would talk. They are the things these people would say. But anyway, that's all. That doesn't affect my rating of the book, because again, it's a product of its time, and it's not so much that it's not clear that it reflects the author's beliefs so much as his beliefs of the time and place, if any of this makes sense. But all of that being said, I really enjoy the character of Shaft. He's a blaxploitation icon from the movies, and the books were obviously popular enough that he wrote 6 more after this. And let me see. Oh, and the author, he won the NAACP Image Award for creating the immensely popular Shaft book series. So apparently they didn't have a problem with it. It took me a little while to get into the writing style, the narrative style, and the characters. And there are still some aspects of it that I found a bit confusing, which really reminded me of some of Raymond Chandler's stuff. Some of his Philip Marlowe stories could be very convoluted and confusing. But once I got into it, once I got into the characters and what was going on, I really started to enjoy it. And Shaft is a flawed character. He is a very strong, proud, intelligent person of color, but he does have these racist tendencies, and he admits to having these racist tendencies. He was, as a juvenile, he was a criminal. It's a bit of a trope, but he got to a point where it was get locked up or join the military. He joined the military, did time in Vietnam, came back, became a private detective. One of the characters tells Shaft that he is both a black man and a white man. And Shaft has to think about that, but he can't argue with that description because he is very much a black man, but he's able to work in the white man's world, if that makes sense. And again, 1970s, it's a thing that not all, I'll say minorities, because it's not just black people, but something that not all minorities were necessarily able to do. So Shaft can interact in the black neighborhoods with the black people and in the white neighborhoods with the white people. He still has to deal with being a black man in a white neighborhood, but he's able to win people over, for lack of a better way to put it. There is something that happens here that really surprised me, that a character, again, a big, strong character like Shaft, something happens that surprised me that he would do. I'm not going to say what it is. We can always talk about it in the comments with spoiler warnings, but it was not something I expected to see. Something that makes him a more human character. So I really, really like the character of Shaft, flaws and all. I like the way he is written, and I like he's got, that his own personal code. May not jive with everybody else's code, but he has a code. He's not going to break that code. And like I said, he can work with the criminal element. He works with the cops. There's an Italian cop that he works with, that he has a working relationship with. I enjoy that. I enjoy the dynamics between them. I liked the character of Knox Persons. So again, I mean, this all comes down to 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked this book. I have another Shaft novel that was written for and published by Dynamite. So it's not by Ernest Tidyman. It is a much, much later sequel written by somebody else. I would love to find the other 6 books by Ernest Tidyman, see the development of the character, see the development, possibly, of Ernest Tidyman's writing style. But I have not seen the movie. The only Shaft movie I've seen, there's a few. I don't know how many of the 7 original books were made into movies. But then there was I guess, kind of a legacy sequel starring Samuel L. Jackson, and he was the son of the original Shaft. And then there's a relatively recent one. I don't remember who plays essentially the grandson of the original Shaft. And it has all 3. It has whoever's playing the grandson, and then it has Samuel L. Jackson as the son, and then it has, I believe it's Richard Roundtree who plays Shaft. All three of them are in the most recent one. I haven't seen that. I've only seen the first one that starred Samuel L. Jackson. Not the first one that starred Samuel L. Jackson. I will go and watch it now that I've read the book. I definitely want to see it. I enjoy blaxploitation films when they're well done or at least entertaining, because I like Dolomite stuff, which you can't say is well done, but they're very entertaining. And there's a lot of good blaxploitation horror movies that I enjoy. But anyway, so I'm gonna watch the movie now that I've read the book. 4 out of 5 stars for Shaft by Ernest Tidyman, and he does not have a mustache in the book. They gave him the mustache in the movie. So recommendations. If you like Shaft or if you find Shaft interesting, first of all, right off the bat, and maybe this is too on the nose, but the Easy Rawlins books by Walter Mosley. I've read the first 3, I think. I think I've read the first 3 so far. I know I've read at least 2. I think it's been 3. Michael Booker might be able to tell you. He might remember better than I do how many of them I've read so far. But Easy Rawlins, a African-American private investigator-ish, even earlier than the 70s, at least that's where they start, earlier than the 70s. So I highly recommend at least the first 2 or 3. I'm guessing the rest are all great. Michael Booker is a big fan. And then the Philip Marlowe books by Raymond Chandler. Not a character of color, but a private detective back in the 40s, perhaps. Don't remember the exact time frame. In Los Angeles, and again, the way that Tidyman writes about New York is the way that Chandler was writing about Los Angeles, and it's definitely that private detective noir, twisty turny femme fatale kind of thing. I think matches very well with Shaft and the feeling that this book has. I could recommend a number of private detective stuff. Like, again, the Robert B. Parker Spencer books, Robert Crace, and the Elvis Cole books. But those are maybe a step off from the feeling of the Shaft book. And so I'm kind of going with the vibe. But if you're just looking for private detective stuff, you can't go wrong with Robert B. Parker's Spencer books, especially the earliest ones, and Elvis Cole from Robert Crace, the Elvis Cole books. But Walter Mosley's Easy Rawlins books, Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe books. Those are my recommendations if you like Shaft or find this sort of thing interesting. Question for the video. First of all, are you familiar with Shaft? Have you watched any of the movies? Have you read any of the books? What do you think about those? And then part 2, are you a fan of blaxploitation? Do you know anything at all about blaxploitation? What are your thoughts on that? And part 3, something that we've talked about before. When a book is of its time, how much are you bothered or not bothered by things that in a modern book would absolutely be problematic? No question that, again, it's characters say things as part of who they are as a character. But when it's in the narration of the book, it's different. So do you have any thoughts on that, basically, is what I'm asking. All of this, let me know in the comments below. Excuse me. As for me, I've already told you about how much Shaft I have had in my life. It's maybe not the best way to put it. I do enjoy a well-made, or at least very entertaining, blaxploitation film, as I said. The Dolomite movies are hilarious, and I wish I could remember. There's one in particular, one really good horror movie that falls under blaxploitation. It's not Blackula, um, but and nothing wrong with Blackula, but just a particular sort of voodoo zombie revenge mobster story. And I can't remember the name of it, but I really, really enjoyed that. So yeah, it's, again, as with just about anything, if it's well done, if it's entertaining, I enjoy it. And as for being a product of its time, I do think, yes, you need to, it's always situational, but you need to look at something as a product of when it came out. It doesn't make it right, but it does make it palatable, perhaps. Again, always situational, always depends on the product itself, but I'm not going to throw a blanket ban on this sort of thing, if that makes sense. Anyway, if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, I will have links for my Twitter, Instagram, and Bluesky down in the description. And that's all I've got. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith. Until next time, read more books.